Hi guys, welcome to module number 7. We are going to be talking about decision making. And every single semester I love hearing from students. Anytime I ask about leadership skills, decision making is always part of the process. Usually it is a quality that students list as a very important quality for making decisions in leadership. Usually we've talked a great deal about how leaders are influencers, right? They create an influence around them. They are able to influence decisions. They are able to influence the way in which their group goes or leans towards them. So decision making is incredibly important. Obviously, you know what a decision is. It is, the option between two or more choices, two or more alternatives. Usually a problem is presenting itself, but not all the time. You can see with a programmed versus a non-programmed type of decision. Usually, like if you're looking at programmed within, maybe a healthcare setting, a hospital, a corporate wellness center, you have the obvious decisions in terms of staffing and schedules, maybe expanding inventory. But then, of course, you have the non-programmed decisions, which are really like looking to maybe expand the actual market. This was something that HealthSource Solutions did, which is the company that I worked for that had a contract with Smith & Nephew. We looked at expanding the market within the Memphis area, expanding the reach of the company. And then the other types of decisions, your problem solving or your opportunistic. The opportunistic really just, they kind of fall in your lap. That can be, whether maybe if you're a nonprofit company, a nonprofit organization, maybe there was a large amount of money donated. Maybe you can expand patient care. Maybe you can offer an additional service to a targeted population. Again, all of that revolves around decision making. So we're going to look at different ways to to address decisions and to face them head on, and the best types of ways to make decisions. We have really emphasized over and over again, when you are working as a project manager and you are working with employees, the best practices are really to involve your participants, to involve your staff members. This can be looked at like a needs assessment. We've emphasized that over and over again in our classes, how a needs assessment is conducted, because again, you're hearing what your participants want. What do they think that is important? What do they think would be beneficial? If you're looking, this is something we always look to expand equipment selection in the fitness center at Smith & Nephew, and we always looked to provide a customer satisfaction survey looking at what equipment would they like to have purchased if this was an opportunity down the road. Of course, anytime you're making decisions, this should be orderly and rational. Very, very important that this is conducted in an organized manner. And then you also, when you're looking at participant level of a participant involvement, you're looking at several different types of group managers. You're looking at that autocratic leadership style. We've talked about this before, but managers make decisions alone, and they really use the information and tell the participants what we're doing. And there has been that shift away from the autocratic style of leadership and the autocratic style of participant involvement to really more of a consultative, where managers consult their participants, they consult their staff members. And then of course we've also talked about the group mentality, where managers really come in, or the democratic mentality, where a manager shares the information and the group as a whole makes the decision of what's going to happen. And really the manager acts as a chairperson and does not always try to sway the group into his or her way of thinking. So it's very important to differentiate between these types of participant involvement, between these types of managers, because we come back over and over again to the best style to use when dealing with large groups and dealing with leadership, and as well as dealing with ways to manage your population and your staff members. I'm going to just breeze over this very briefly. You can see, of course, that this is the decision-making process. The decision is needed, defining the problem. Obviously, it's very important to sit down and define the actual problem and to look at the problem as a whole. Of course, coming up with relevant alternatives, assessing, choosing, implementing, and evaluating, which is something we have discussed over and over in your health science classes. But you can see in our next slide, this is really, you have participated in this type of decision making a great deal. And it really is looking at all of the alternatives, which is an opportunity to brainstorm. You have participated in brainstorming activities probably from the time you were in elementary school. Brainstorming ideas, coming up with good ideas, the pros and cons of each, and we're going to look at that in a different way, in a few different ways in just a minute. But before we get into other ways to make a decision, I do want to express how you invoke your participants to speak out and to share their opinions openly and honestly. This is very important, especially as you are moving into the workforce and you are working with a variety of people from all different backgrounds, all different work experience, all different educational backgrounds. It's very important how you address your population to encourage them to share their opinions and their suggestions. Again, you're describing alternatives as tentative and encouraging participants to try to improve upon them. One of the great things about brainstorming is that so many times people will throw out an idea and one of your counterparts will add to that idea or take away from it, and that is where the evolution and the creation of an idea is formed, and that is one of the things that is really beautiful when you work together. This is something to think about at the university level. Right now, our world has obviously been really changed considerably with Corona, and accommodating and changing and swapping midstream of how we're going to handle this new development and this new disease. At the university level, Dr. Rudd put together a task force of how we are going to reopen. So you can tell that this was very planned and purposeful, again, to make a decision at the university level of how we are going to accommodate the new constraints of this disease and how we are going to accommodate students to keep them as safe as possible. So again, decision making is, it can be very purposeful and it can be very planned. And that's when the decision making you can go in a much wiser route than, of course, making irrational, very quick decisions, not thinking through the actual pros and cons and the actual alternatives to a plan. In terms of asking for your participants to expand on their ideas and their suggestions, you really want to focus on their positive attributes. You want to be tactful. I can't express that one enough. You really think about all the people that you have admired in your life. They're probably kind and they're probably nice, and you probably felt relaxed around them. You probably felt like you were able to share your opinion without being judged. You want to listen when you are listening to people who maybe criticize your ideas as a program manager or project manager or any type of leadership position. You want to listen to those ideas without becoming defensive, and you want to be able to think through the entire process rationally. That's incredibly important. You also want to really make sure that you are actively seeking out participants' opinions and ideas. One of the things that I often found when I would send out a group email at Smith & Nephew, I would often find that I wouldn't receive as many responses to a group email as I would to a targeted individual email. So obviously I needed to send out some mass communications, but I would send out some smaller communications if I needed participant buy-in. And I would talk to them about what their opinions were and if they thought this would work well. Discussing it at the individual level was really essential for moving several things forward in the fitness center. So when you're looking at developing those alternative decisions, there are some go-tos in terms of alternate decisions. You can see that there are ready-made alternatives. These types of alternatives have been done previously. There has been success with them previously. And then, of course, you can also custom make an alternative to the actual specific situation in which you're in. And then, of course, I've mentioned the creative process in which again, that brainstorming, the making sure that everyone is feeling comfortable so that they are able to express their opinions. In this next slide, you'll be able to see the decision grid. And this is something that I hope you're able to practice when you are out in the workforce. You can see how the alternatives are listed here, and then what the patient's, customers, what their preferences are, and then the program participants' preferences, as well as the financial impact, the relative feasibility, is this a possible option, and then the actual decision. And you can see in terms of, this is where it's all really laid out. It's a very option 1, 2, 3, 4. The fact that it's very organized and laid out as opposed to just a pros and cons list, this gives a bit more than just a pro and a con list. So you're able to see the big picture of the decision that is being made and the decision between options. Like any decision making, if you are the project manager and that this decision rests on your shoulders, or yours and maybe a few other essential individuals' shoulders, there is some degree of risk whenever you make a decision. There is a degree of risk that you may make some people upset, or they may not like your decision. That is the nature of leadership, and it is one of those things that's why you don't want to enter into decision making lightly. It should be well thought out, well prepared, and well planned. You can see in our next slide the brainstorming as well as the nominal group technique. I want you to spend some time reading through that because there will be exam questions about that. You also, whenever you're considering an alternative, you want to ask these 3 questions. Again, does the alternative accomplish the program's goals and objectives? This is the question we go back to every single time we make a decision. Will this decrease the scope of the actual program? Will it expand the scope of the program? These questions should be asked, as well as the impact financially, as well as, is this an option? Is this actually feasible? All of these things are really important questions to ask when considering a decision. Here we're going to look at 2 other options for decision making. This one is the cost-benefit analysis, and you can see here you're looking at actual numbers, presenting the value of benefits and presenting the value of costs. This is excellent for business owners who are very interested in the bottom line. How much is this going to cost me? That is what so many CEOs and directors ask in terms of making a change or making a decision. How much is this going to cost me? So this really puts the decision in financial terms, and that may be the driving force behind many of the decisions you make. We're also going to look at the PERT chart. You can see here, I want you to look through this and make sure you are studying this in your textbooks. But this considers the timing of the activities and the best sequence for a series of activities. This is something we did talk about in your schedule, and making sure that in looking at the critical path, which is the shortest amount of time that it's going to take to complete the project. So you can see the critical path is the actual bulleted, the dotted line here. But you can see here, these are sequential. So this is a decision to develop an open heart surgery unit. And you can see these in this kind of line here, these are things that can be done simultaneously. So it's important to kind of see how this is happening, how the development of the open heart surgery unit is being developed, and what is going on at the same time that the actual open heart surgery unit is being opened. So a lot of times this can be done looking at the actual how long this is going to take. Is this feasible? Answering that question. So looking at the then also looking at the very optimistic versus very average versus very pessimistic timeframes in which the actual job would be completed. Those are very important in terms of making sure that you're maintaining stakeholder expectations. And then, of course, you have your general approach to implementation and making a decision, the top-down approach, the bottom-up approach, or participative. Remember, we've emphasized a great deal in terms of incorporating your team, incorporating your participants in the actual approach to implementation of your decision. This is very important to actually address how you are going to implement your decision, because so many times participants And people in general have a hard time with change. So the way that you can do this is incorporating your participants, your staff members, to develop basically a rollout plan of how this is going to actually look. And this is our discussion on decision making. Please make sure you study your textbook on this, as well as any notes that you've taken while I've been talking. I hope you're all doing well and have a great day. Thanks.